I'm Belinda Goodrich.
And I'm Brandy Bean. Welcome to
See How I Did That? This is your opportunity to get engaged and inspired by our guests who have overcome obstacles to achieve success.
Real women,
Real talk,
and real inspiration. Your transformation starts now. I'm Brandy Bean.
And I'm Belinda Goodrich.
And this is
See How I Did That? On today's episode of See How I Did That, we got to interview the one and only Miss Alana Hill, and she is an international change management leadership expert. She is also the author of What's Your Catalyst? The Power of Managed Change, among other books. And she is just incredible, is she not?
It is.
Very inspiring. Brandy, what did you take from this interview?
I took a lot. Oh my gosh, this interview was so powerful. I mean, we talked about losing a child, which, I mean, I can't even fathom.
Right.
Let alone overcome it. We talked about service and like your actions and different tricks that you can take to provide some service. And then we also talked about blended families.
Yeah.
Which I think,
that was really powerful.
Especially nowadays. It's so important to understand and really look at it from a different point of view.
Yeah, she was so beautifully transparent with us, and about her struggles, and even how she had to channel that, how she had to challenge herself to overcome them. And what I really loved about Alana is she has such a loving heart. I mean, she comes from this beautiful Christian heart of service, and it shows. You know, it is who she is. But yet she was so realistic about the challenges she still faces. And I love that she's, you know, a chronic yeller. And, you know, we talked about that. We're recovering yellers, you know, and I just love that, that refreshing honesty that she brought to it. So we hope you enjoy this podcast.
Yes.
Here is our interview with Miss Alana Hill. Our guest today is the one and only Alana Hill, and she is she's totally my
She's a
shero.
catalyst.
She's a catalyst, and she's my shero.
Tell us
more about you and about your story. What makes your story and your journey unique? Because you certainly have an incredible story, Alana.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I mean, just the opportunity to uplift other women is just something I'm all about. I'm in oil and gas. So I've been in the oil and gas industry for 20 plus years. And one of the things that has allowed me to even remain in an industry such as that one is when we have the opportunity to find other women and to build that camaraderie. And so when we talk about my story, that's really kind of one of the main parts of it is being an African-American woman in a white male predominated industry, in Texas, no less. So, so I found myself kind of being the only in a lot of rooms, the only, you could pick which only I was. And so certainly wherever I could lend my voice to someone else who was the only, or someone who was, trying to figure out how to navigate new waters, then I was always eager to raise my hand to help them do that. Kind of started from being a kid, I moved a lot as a child, and so I was always the new kid, and I always had to say, hi, my name is Alana. So just even the whole conversation we had about pronouncing my name, I've done that all my life.
Right.
And so just being the new kid and just helping people, just the desire to help people, especially get into new environments.
You have such a beautiful resiliency about you that you make probably the scariest thing, which is the big C word, right? Change, like okay. And then your new book, which, oh my gosh, again, as the project manager, speaks to my heart and soul. What's Your Catalyst? The Power of Managed Change. And so what made you go from love as a catalyst to what's your catalyst? What was that transition like?
Well, for me, the transition as a project management professional was the opportunity to go beyond the story. One of the things, and I share in What's Your Catalyst, about the importance of lessons learned. And we all know that as project managers, that's like one of the most important tools in our toolbox is to capture and analyze our lessons learned. Well, we have to do the same thing in life. And the reason I even wrote a book from a life change book from a project management perspective is because it is the most important project that we'll ever lead. And that is our life. And so applying strategic planning to it, understanding that resilience is rooted in optimism, and that optimism is the notion that the next time it will be better. If I keep trying, if I get back to my goals, if I focus on what matters most, things will work out. And that has been, quite frankly, the secret to my resilience, is continuing to focus on what's ahead, just that vision casting and moving according to my vision each and every day keeps you from getting stuck in a pit.
Talk about being in a male dominated field. So I was in the military and I did construction in the military. So I was of very few women in my command. And I know the challenges that it faces. Can you talk a little bit about how you overcame those and what ultimately those challenges helped you with in your career right now?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for your service. And, and interestingly enough, I mean, I didn't serve in the military, but I was born on a military base. So I feel like that I've got some military connection.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, really one of the secrets is realizing that there are things that are different, but really bridging the gap by leveraging those things that are the same. I mean, in a male dominated industry, at the end of the day, while I was fracking a well in South Texas, we all had in common the fact that we wanted to provide excellent service for our clients. We wanted to progress in our careers, and we wanted to go home to our families. And so we had a lot more, there were a lot more things that united us than divided us. And so it was really continuing to push that issue, having those conversations about the differences, because we get an opportunity to learn from each other, but to not let them separate us.
Yeah. And I like that point of what are our common threads? What are our common goals? What do we share versus, okay, let's point out the differences here. Let's talk about what we do have in common. And I think that can be so unifying. And I think that's a very powerful part of your message. You took a trip to Africa. As part of your job. And I love that this is the opening to your story where you go, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, so please correct me on any of this, but you go over with this mission of here's what my job is going to be, and I'm very serious about my job, and here's what I'm focused on. And there was a part of you that from a cultural perspective, you were excited. You wanted to go to Africa. This is a big thing. I believe with anybody, when we understand where our roots are, where we're from, understanding our cultural DNA. I think anytime you can revisit that is so powerful. But you were there on a job, but it didn't take long for you to get a little, I don't want to say distracted, because I know you performed with unbelievable pressure, but your eyes were open. And describe what happened there when you were in Africa.
Yeah, well, so I went, so I became a project manager through an engineering career path. So as an engineer, as a field engineer, and then moving into different engineering roles, anyone who can tell you that even from the curriculum of engineering, there is a lot of emphasis on deficits, finding what's wrong and fixing what's wrong. I mean, that's what your degree is, that's what your career becomes, finding what's wrong, fixing what's wrong, see a problem, solve a problem. And so I had become the master of seeing a problem, solving a problem, even sometimes when there wasn't one. And so I was sent to Africa by my company so that I could go see a problem, solve a problem. And so I went kind of armed with the authority from headquarters to go to this third world country and to wag my finger in their face and tell them that they need to hurry up. They needed to comply. They needed to make sure that our dashboard that we had, the ivory tower, that it looked good. And it didn't take long, as you mentioned, it didn't take long for me to realize that as much as compliance is important, compassion was even more important. And what I saw while I was there really opened my eyes and started to formulate what I now call the Miss Engineer way, which is balancing having a critical eye and a compassionate spirit. So there were some things that I saw and I had to give remedial action for, but A, my delivery in doing so changed. And B, and probably more importantly, that when I came back, I held myself even more accountable to doing more outside of what I was doing at work, to interject purpose and passion in my work, but then to do more outside of work to really make an impact on my community and the world at large.
So you mentioned your 4 boys, but I know that there is some backstory to your 4 boys that I would love for you to give our listeners and explain your family dynamic.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. I mean, I know every family is unique, and ours is no exception. I'm part of a beautiful blended family. When I married my wonderful husband, he had 3 amazing boys, and I never I've never referred to them as his boys. From the moment we got married, I said, I do. And we all became family. Now, that didn't mean that, instantly we were singing Kumbaya. Instantly, we were family. And what that meant is instantly I became committed to doing everything that I could to ensure that we had a good relationship. And did I do some things wrong? Absolutely. Did we struggle? Absolutely. But there was always love there. And that was actually the reason for the title of my first 2 books, Love as a Catalyst, because blended families are complicated, but love changes everything. And it changed the dynamic that I had with my boys when they were able to see and understand that. And first and foremost, when I was able to lead with more compassion. So it was really a growing for me to demonstrate love more readily. And as a result, my family began to demonstrate and feel love more specifically. And then to that, when we talk about the story, my oldest son, all my boys are M's. So my oldest son is Malcolm. So it's Malcolm, Marcus, Mason, and Matthew. Our oldest son, Malcolm, was diagnosed with cancer in 2010, and we lost him in 2014. So when we talk about journey, when we talk about resilience, it was a very, very challenging time for my family. It was a time, the way that intersects too with my profession, with my career, is that I was so grateful that I had started a home-based consultancy so that I could be home to do more with my kids, because that was what I wanted to do. And as it turned out, kind of like with as it turned out, I was able to do more in getting him to treatment and things like that when that struck for our family.
I'm so sorry for your loss.
Definitely.
I mean, I love, because in one of the books in the book you mentioned, and then that was our fourth son. Like you never. I love that you say you never called them his kids. Mm-hmm. And I think having stepchildren or having a blended family, it can be very challenging. I was, part of a blended family, and I think there's always a tough dynamic there. What advice would you give to women that are entering into a family where their husband, significant other, has children? What advice would you give them?
I think they really need to think about and pray about what role they want to take. In my case, I decided early on that I wanted to be an involved bonus mom. The steps that we have lead to the front door, right? Because we all know the connotation behind that word as well. And so we know that language matters. And so my youngest has never felt like he's never been an only child. He knows that he's one of 4 boys. My boys have, they've all received the same love, the same discipline. And so part of the challenge in that came that, and I'm old school Southern, you're in my house, you're mine. And so that means you follow my rules. So there was some growing pains on that, but my older boys are adults and they get it. And I love to hear them say, Dad, Lena, 'cause they call me Lena, you were hard on us, but we know why. And that's what parenting is all about. It's making those tough choices, but it's making a decision about the kind of parent that you want to be and sticking with it.
I like that. Yeah. I like that. You also stated, and I thought this was really cool, because and we kind of laughed, not at you, but with you on this one about being a yeller. Recovering yeller. You state you're a recovering yeller. I come from a long family of yellers. I was a yeller, and we have it. And you said that, when Malcolm was sick, you started to kind of temper that and had that little bit of a reality of, wait a minute, well, I'm changing my behavior for this. Why am I just not changing my behavior?
Right. Yeah. It was realizing that while his cancer was a catalyst for me to be aware of that that's how I should love all the time. And while I don't look at any of my kids and go, oh, treat them as if they had cancer, it's loving someone well. And doing that means tempering yourself. It means not reacting, or certainly not overreacting, and not doing damage that you have to keep doing damage control for.
Right.
And so that was one of the things and it wasn't easy, and I've not perfected it. And as a matter of fact, my youngest just came home from school, and he'd probably pop in here and say, well, she hasn't gotten it yet, but I've gotten a lot better and a lot better. And sadly, that's because I had a lot of room to grow. And one of the things that I intentionally do in the book is to be transparent about areas where I fall short, because I didn't want to present myself as somebody who's got it all together and I know all the answers. I guess when you think from a scholar standpoint, okay, yes, I know the answers. application takes time, and one of the things that I always encourage my clients to do is to praise progress. And so I've made significant progress, and that I'm grateful for, and I see it in my relationships.
We will get back to our interview shortly after this word from our sponsor, Goodrich Publishing. At Goodrich Publishing, we believe everyone has a story that needs to be told. Have you considered writing your book? We're here to help you get that book in your hands in the most economic way possible. Find us on the web at goodrichpublishing.com. And now, back to our interview. Tell our listeners what was the message with the or is there, because I think that is so incredibly powerful.
The backstory there is that while I was on my trip to Africa, I was on the second leg. This was an incredibly long trip. I, at this point, had seen things that just broke my heart. My heart was breaking daily. And so by the time I'd gotten to my keyboard to send an email back home, playing the Where's Elena game, I just had such a heavy heart. My spirit was so broken, and I literally felt helpless. And we all know what it's like to be in a situation where we feel helpless, either helpless to change something in our own life or helpless to change something in someone else's life. And it was such a heavy feeling. And when I sent the email and I described the conditions and I said, and there's nothing I can do. And my uncle replied back, or is there? And that challenge, I mean, so when we talk about the spark that lit that, I mean, I sat up straight in my hotel room, jet lagged and all, and I was immediately thrust into action. And even on those days when I began to question, get doubtful, either, some question, helplessness or whatever might seep in, that or is there has stuck with me professionally, personally, in relationships. And I mean, just even this morning, I ran 5 miles, and the or is there was challenging me as my knee was starting to hurt. Well, you can't run anymore. There's nothing you can do. Or is there? So I sped walk until my body was ready to run. Right.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome.
I mean, and it's so powerful. And I think it goes back to what you said when I said the phrase stepchildren. You're like, our words matter.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that those little messages, I look at it two ways. I had an uncle, a dear uncle, who was probably the adult I was the closest to it in my adult years as a family member. And I was really struggling at the time. And his message to me was, you are too precious to waste.
Mm.
And it was that one little sentence that has so stuck with me, and it's made me realize my inner value. And I think the same with your uncle. So I love that it was an uncle connection that we both have there in those little phrases. But I think that we also have to take that and remember that when we're interacting with people, family members, peers, sometimes just little words of encouragement like that can really get them turned around. And so you came home, and not long after you came home from your trip, New Orleans. And what did you do with New Orleans?
Or is there popped up. I mean, I was sitting at home watching the news, and I was on a trip with some friends, and so I already kind of felt, I wasn't impacted by it, but it was certainly close enough. I was standing with somebody who had just gotten the word that her mother lost everything. So
in the hurricane, when the
levee broke. So it wasn't really just watching it on the news; it was watching her face and knowing that I'd met her mom. So it felt like. And then when I began to watch it on the news and seeing that, they were bringing people into the Astrodome of all places, and I knew that I could get there. I could get in the car and get there. And I didn't want to do nothing. I didn't want to do nothing. I knew I wanted to do something, and I wasn't sure what to do. So I got in my car and I went down to sign up to volunteer. And I kind of ran around with an or is there mindset the entire time. Literally, they would assign, because it was a little chaotic. I've done volunteer coordination, and that was such a grand scale that volunteers were falling through the cracks. They didn't know what to assign people. And I kind of was like, you really don't need to assign me anything. I'm here to love on people. I'm here to, I'll move what I need to move. I'll hug who needs, and so it was just really an opportunity to show love to people who were just so broken in that moment.
And what would you say to people, that are already stressed with life? They're already busy. I can't even handle my own life. What would you say the impact of service is? Like, why should people reach out and serve?
Oh God, it is huge. I started kind of using the hashtag helping heals. when you help other people, first of all, it takes your mind off of what's ailing you and puts your mind on supporting someone else. So when you step out of selfishness and into selflessness, the focus change is so huge. And then, of course, just from a compassion standpoint, the feeling of knowing that you've helped somebody is there's just nothing like it. And so if you're looking for a way to balance, your the stress of your life and your busyness, and you want to put a nice layer of some good emotion on top of that, the reality, you put a layer of icing that is helping, that is service, and knowing that you've made an impact on someone else's life.
So young adults is a tough time, I think, for everybody, whether you're a late teenager, early 20s, and being, if you had something happen to you in the past, you may hang on to that and dwell on that, and you're not, almost like you're suffocated because you feel like you can't get through those walls. Mm-hmm. So you had something very traumatic happen to you when you were a teenager. Do you mind speaking about that and just kind of how you overcame that? Because I'm sure that some of our listeners have gone through maybe similar experiences that you had.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I grew up from the age of 12 is when I say that I first lost my mom. I lost my mom at 12 when she became addicted to drugs, and it was such a quick. It was so quick, and it was so overwhelming, right? So it pulled her away very quickly. So it was an immediate life change. And then I went to live with my dad. And so I'm thankful for that. But so that was several years of being a motherless child, which is the way I describe it in my book. And then through an acquaintance that my mom knew, she was actually murdered just a few days before my senior year in high school started. So it was a really, really difficult time. Starting your senior year, for most people, that's yay. Let's think about what we're going to wear to prom. Let's think about homecoming. And for me, it was trying to figure out what I was going to do with this boulder that was on my shoulder and in my heart, because I'd become so hardened by that, because it was really the only way to survive. It was on the news. There was a lot of negative attention around it, and I didn't want it. I didn't want that negative attention. I didn't want the sympathy. I really just wanted it to go away. Yeah. And I was college bound at that point. So it really, when we talk about catalysts and things that catalyze my changes, I was determined even more so to go off to college. And so I put my head down and I, applied for scholarships and got an academic scholarship to Texas A&M University. And so that's where I went and pursued an engineering degree, which already had an incredible amount of rigor. And so when I look back and I think about the resilience, really in that case, perseverance, because I was really pushing through a really, really difficult time. But one of the things that I did as a survival tactic, and a lot of people do, we call it compartmentalization. Yeah. But I'd stored up that pain and so many other things that had happened in a closet. Yeah. I just pushed them aside. I stuffed and run. And it all boiled up. Basically, I tried to close the closet door one day and it wouldn't close because it was bursting at the seams. And so that was actually going through a divorce in my early young adult years. And so it was really the culmination of all of these hurts happening at the same time, and realizing that, okay, now it's time to open that closet door, deal with everything that was in my closet, work through things, and literally do the work to foster my own healing. Because at that point, as a young woman, my next step in life, or we have our lives mapped out, my next step was parenthood, or at least I'd hoped. Right. And I knew that there was no way that I could be effective if I was broken. So I was really, really committed to being healed so that I could be effective with my children that I would hope to have one day.
If you could give somebody that is in similar shoes, so a young adult, some advice to open that door, how would you want them to do so?
I would encourage them to realize that, yes, that is a survival mechanism, and our bodies, our minds, our psyches do that for a reason, and that's how we get through. I mean, you served our country. That's how people get through very difficult situations in that moment. But it's making sure that you don't let that become long-term storage, that you work through that, and that you get, help that you need. And, I think I'm grateful that we are in a time in our society where things, saying words like therapy. Those aren't bad words.
Right.
But, for a long time, those were bad words.
Yeah, totally.
And finding ways to cope from a healthy standpoint. I have a running visor that says running is cheaper than therapy. Because quite frankly, I couldn't afford all the therapy that I needed, right?
Girl.
Right.
Exactly.
I can't go every
That's why
single
I run.
day. Yeah, I wouldn't get anything done. But so it's finding those things that help you. And certainly for me, and I certainly encourage people. But for me, it was really my faith. My faith is a huge part of how I healed. And it's really, when I talk about love as a catalyst, I don't tap dance around. It is the love of God that filled my heart that I'm then able to share with other people. Not just Elena's love, but a love that's much bigger than me. And so that has enabled me to walk through some doors that I know that could have had me rocking in a corner looking like Miss Sophia.
You're raising boys in a tough time. You're raising African-American men in a tough time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to say that because you would think, okay, we've moved past this. Like, it feels like we've gone backwards. How does that impact your parenting, or does it?
Oh, wow. It does. It hugely impacts my parenting because, for one, I'm painfully aware as an African-American woman that they're often underestimated.
Mm-hmm.
And then given the credit that they deserve. So I know firsthand the struggle that they'll have in self-identity and being seen as, the intelligent, warm, loving people that they are. They're unfortunately can be seen as a threat to some. And so one of the things that it does is when you talked about my faith shining through, is I encourage them to do the same because, the word tells us they will know us by our love. And so when we are seen by our love and when our light shines, that speaks for us in a lot of situations. But one of the things that I think it's done is help me encourage them to build their armor, because we have to be incredibly resilient when you literally walk out your house and forces are against you.
Yes.
And so it creates, and so you want that armor on the outside, but you don't want a hardened heart. And so that's the balance that I teach my young men who, as I mentioned in the book, my mantra is that I'm raising future husbands. And so I want them to have enough softness and nurturing and compassion to be able to fill that role in their homes and in their marriages, but then also be the strong priests and providers that they're called to be and that they need to be in their lives. But one other point on that is, because I can never miss an opportunity to mention this, is having to have the talk. The talk is a really unfortunate part of the African-American experience in this day and age, because like you said, we should be past this. But the reality is that we're not. And so it's helping them understand, and certainly when it gets to certain ages, like when each of my boys got to the age of driving, how it impacted my parenting, quite frankly, it terrified me. There were days and moments of just sheer panic as I, watched anxiously to make sure that he'd arrived home, and just realizing that there are just additional forces at school and things like that. So just really helping them know how to advocate for themselves and how to operate in excellence in all they do.
That's awesome.
You are a wonderful, wonderful mother.
Yes.
And, it is truly sad we have to think about that. Like I say, it just blows my mind that we're still having it. And like I say, I think there has been a backslide. I'll make that commentary. And, I think these are the conversations that we all need to have. And I saw something recently, and this because you're in front of people speaking. And, the mantra is, don't talk about race, don't talk about religion, don't talk about guns. And I saw somebody kind of push back and said, maybe if we actually did talk about race and religion and different perspectives and different beliefs, maybe we could have good, healthy conversations.
Absolutely. I mean, certainly we see one of the things that we're seeing, and I'm glad to start to see the switch, is people realizing that, saying, oh, I'm colorblind, I don't see color, kind of realizing what a foolish notion that is.
Right.
Yeah.
To realize where that came from. That was a response to, well, if I see color, I'm going to discriminate. Well, how about if you learn to treat everyone with respect, regardless of what you see? And so that's where we have to get. And that's where I raise my hand every time. Send me to have that conversation. Send me. Want me to keep having that conversation. Because I do so with just enough angry Black woman, just enough to make the point,
Yes.
but with enough clarity that I can speak to a variety of audiences. I mean,
I like to say have curiosity.
yes.
Like, don't deny the difference, embrace, find out, and have these conversations, and let's learn and let's understand. And for us, as we look at this podcast on, how do we help people grow? We're in just a tough time.
I would like to blame social media for that. I will blame social media for a lot of our world's problems. But I think what happens is we get so comfortable behind the screen that you actually don't realize that there's another person behind the other screen.
Mm-hmm.
And so when people make comments, they're trying to be funny or whatever the case may be. It's like there's other people, like real life people on the other side of that screen that are being affected by that. And I think we're so quick to put up judgment, and because there's no reprimand, because I can say whatever I want on the internet. And
right.
That's fine. And so I think social media it was built to bring us together, and I feel like it's actually tearing us apart and making us segregate ourselves. And it's like, why are we doing this, and what can we do to stop it? And I don't know if there's an answer to it, but hopefully one day through our podcast we will figure it. Or is there?
Or is there? And there is.
There.
And there is. And there is. And that is actually what you were referring to about, you sat around a table and you said we were free to speak because we loved one another.
Yeah.
I don't overuse the word love. It can't be overused.
Right. No.
It's because if we consciously love one another, then we can have those conversations. We can get away from the echo chamber, and we don't have to just love someone because they look like us. If we love someone because they bleed like us, then have the conversations about how we're different. The conversations about what's different takes on a whole nother meaning.
Amen, sister.
Yeah. I love it. And I will use that word love on you all the time because I just love you. I just think you are amazing. And, I think your honesty, your transparency is what we need. I think you are so inspiring to young ladies, older ladies, because you just rock it. But you rock it in a way that you're honest.
Yeah.
Again, you put your struggles out there. And I think that's what resonates with people. And I'm so proud to call you my friend. I'm so proud to be a peer of yours in project management and in the speaking world. And, I love the way you've approached your family and how you've overcome everything. And we're going to definitely put the links to your books on our podcast. I encourage everybody, because I will tell you the new book, really walking through a process to help people embrace change. And it's like I say, I go back to the brain. People don't like change. Well, here's a good process for helping us with that. Yeah. And you've done a beautiful job, Alana. And again, I just am so incredibly blessed to call you my friend. We would like to thank Miss Alana Hill for being our guest on today's episode of See How I Did That? She offered great advice, and if you'd like to learn more about Alana, go to her website at themisengineerway.com. And remember, her book is What is Your Catalyst? The Power of Managed Change. We want to thank Alana for her time, and we also want to thank our sponsor, Goodrich Publishing. If you want to write a book this year, contact Goodrich Publishing, and they'll provide the services and support you need to get it done.